Hi, I'm RobCosman. Welcome to my shop. In this episode, hand planing wood, we're going to show you how to get the opposite edge parallel to the one that we prepared in our last video. We're going to use a panel gauge, scrub plane saw. This will be good. Stay tuned. I'm RobCosman and welcome to my shop. Our piece of wood has now got a reference face and a reference edge, and if you didn't see that, or you need a refresher, if you check this video, it'll bring you up to speed. Our next move is to take this board and get it the width that we want. In most cases, that's going to mean that that edge, new edge, needs to be parallel to this edge. And we have a tool specifically for doing that called a panel gauge. Depending on how wide we need the piece, I'm going to give you a couple of different ways of doing it. So you want to stay tuned right to the end and see that, because one may apply and the other may not. We want to get the best of both. But the next thing I want to do is I want to show you a panel gauge, because we have not talked about that to this point. And I want to give you a couple of options on what to look for if you're going to buy one, or if you're going to make one. I'll give you some tips on that as well. Okay, you can think of a panel gauge as a large marking gauge. Very similar, and they both, in this case, in my case, use a round style cutter, which I prefer, and I'll show you why. Panel gauge, however, a marking gauge has a limitation. And obviously the task is to make a mark parallel to the edge or to the end of the board. However, if you get that cutter much beyond there, there's such small reference area here on the head of the tool that in pulling that and meeting the resistance of that blade dragging through the wood, it's going to want to twist like that on you. So you get much beyond that and it becomes very ineffective. So the old guys did it this way. They made a panel gauge. Has a rabbet along the inside edge of the head, so that prevents it from rolling. So when I'm using it, the corner, which is my reference edge, is going to fit right up in there. And you'll notice that I have another round cutter here on the end, and I've got a wedge. Now what I do to set it is simply loosen the wedge, and we actually make and sell these, and ours are designed so that the wedge doesn't fall out. So it's got that little knob on either end. You get it to where you want it, pull the wedge in to snug it up, and then you bring that back in, and that'll really get it tight so it doesn't move. This end has a round style cutter, so you get that set, and you can either use a rule to get your measurement. If I was building something that called for a 4 3/4 inch piece, then I would simply set that, referencing on the inside edge of the rabbet, get that set to, I'm going to get that wedge ready to tighten up. Get that set, getting the cutter right at the 4 3/4 inch mark. Tighten my wedge, double check it, and then you have my finger holding the head of the tool, and then just tap that with my little square, and you'd be surprised at how snug that gets it. Now what I would do, and you can do it either freehand like this, or you can trap it in the vise. But I would simply take it like that. The rabbet prevents it from rolling, and I would simply scribe my line front to back. Now we're using a piece of red oak. Different woods, different characteristics. Red oak is probably going to be one of the more difficult ones to see a knife line on, unlike a piece of maple or perhaps even a piece of pine. But I'm going to show you a couple of ways of adjusting that. Now I'm going to put this in the vise, trap it in there. Make sure that you have the edge of your board out beyond the edge of your bench so that you're not getting a false reading by your gauge running off of the bench. This piece is 6 3/4. So let's say we're going to need a piece 6 1/2. So I'll loosen this up. Get my steel rule, set it right against the inside edge. What did I say, 6 1/2? Mm-hmm. Okay, that cutter's right on. By the way, it's real easy to read. You can put that cutter right on that mark. Hold that in place. Tap it. Snug it up. Come back and check it one more time. Okay, that's right on. Now, I'm going to reference the good edge. The corner is going to go right up into the gauge, into the rabbet, sorry. And I'm going to run that cutter. I want to push it down hard enough that it leaves a definite mark. Now, you're going to notice something right away, and that is you can hardly see it. Imagine trying to work to that line. I'll show you a couple of ways you can fix it. Take a pencil and your block plane, makes for an expensive pencil sharpener, but what we want to do is we want to cut a wedge shape on the pencil. So I'm just going to run it forward and back, flip it over. Now I need that wedge to be nice and sharp. Now at this point what I could do, I could even see it. Trust me, I've got a method coming that's even better. Find that knife line. Boy, that's hard to see, especially as coarse as this wood is. And you can run, now it wants to follow the grain as well, but you can run that wedge-shaped pencil. That's why you need to have it really nicely pointed. And that will make that a lot easier to see. A lot. That's taking some liberties with that expression. Watch this. So much better. I'm going to take a piece of painter's tape. Doesn't need to be this wide, but this is all I had in the cupboard. Cut it off. Secure that. Now, my panel gauge is still set the same. I'm going to come in. Now I'll come in. Get a hold of that top piece. There. Now we've got something we can see. And when we get close, really close, we'll actually take that off and then with some extra magnification get right to the line. I really don't want to plane all that off. That's a lot of work. You might not feel confident enough with a handsaw that you can go in there and cut close to the line without going through it. In other words, maybe you want to be a little bit closer than that with your saw, or a little farther away, I mean. So the other option we have is to use a scrub plane. Now I want to read the grain direction, and I can tell that I want to go that way. So I'm going to put this in the vise. And the scrub plane, if you're not familiar with it, is very simple. It's probably one of the simplest of planes. It really doesn't have any moving parts. It's got a large rear tote or handle that you can get 4 fingers around. It's got a big open throat. It's got a thick blade. And the most unique feature is the fact that the blade has a curve on the end as opposed to being straight across like most. Set that in there. Doesn't need to be sharpened like a regular plane, meaning I do it on a diamond stone up to 1,000 grit, and that's fine for the type of work it does. Turn that over, and I want to sight down the sole. Now, by the way, this is the way I like to hold it. I can squeeze it between my thumb and my middle finger when I loosen up that lever cap, and then I can snug it up and get it exactly where I want. That's a little heavier than I want. Bring it back. Okay. Now, I've got about 1/4 inch of material to remove, and I can take it pretty quickly with a scrub plane. Now you want to try to keep that edge square, so pay attention to what you're doing. Don't get it too out of whack. Easier to look this way. Now, if I want to get closer, I'll pull the blade, retract the blade a little bit, so I'm not taking quite as heavy a cut. Always trying to keep that edge that I'm working on parallel to the line. Okay, now at this stage, I'll come in with my jack plane, my foreplane, my jointer, whatever you're happening to be using. First thing I need to do is come in and get that surface on one plane. May not be square, but I just want it to be what we would call flat. Watch my line, I don't get in trouble. Getting really close here. So I'll work up at this end. Dangerously close down here. Let's check that. Now here's the problem, I got the tape there, but the tape's wide enough that with this small square I don't have to worry about it being inaccurate. If that was a narrow band of tape and I had a larger square, I'll show you what I mean, and we were pushing on like that, that's not going to give you an accurate reading because the tape is holding the large part of the square not parallel to the face. But with this one, I don't have to worry about it. Check that, that's really close. Okay, that's not bad at all. Remember, you can also do this one the same way I showed you on one of our last episodes where we set this down propped up and we use the bench as a big shooting board to square that edge. But for right now, we're really close to that line. So we're close here, but we still have some material to remove down here. So I know that it's square, so as long as my blade is parallel to my sole and I balance the plane properly, I shouldn't worry about throwing that out of square. I've got extra material here. So right about here I'm going to start. Take a pass, come back a little further. Check and see where we are. That's nice and flat. A little bit more. Now, at this point, I'm going to pull the blade in because we're getting really close. Now, that has me close enough. I'm going to take this tape off because now I've got to see that fine line. I'm going to actually put some extra eyes on here. Okay, I'm just starting to see the feather. And what I mean by the feather is the cutter is going to leave a fine feather of wood as you get closer and closer to that line. And you can actually get to a point where you can use that as a gauge to determine when you're at your setting. Really close down here, so I'm going to go from about here to maybe 3/5 of the way down. Now I got to get a closer look at it. Okay, I can still see scribe line everywhere, which is good. That means I haven't gone too low. And it looks like the edge up here is now parallel to that scribe line. So I'll just keep taking full length passes. And actually, I'm going to go in and check one more time with the square to see if we've maintained our edge. We're a little bit heavy, or a little bit high, I should say, on this side. So I'm going to come in here, use my finger underneath to hold the blade. You can actually reach over here too, to hold the plane flush with the outside edge so that I don't take this low edge down any lower. Meanwhile, I'm removing this high edge. Now, I'll take one or two passes to straighten it out. Just feeling to see if there's any of that little feather left. I think it's all gone. Okay, I don't see any remnant of that edge left. What I mean is that marking gauge line. That could take one more pass. One more pass meaning taking off that high edge. Now I'm getting dangerously close to where I need to be. I'm going to pull the blade in a little bit. One more. I'm just watching my shaving. So when my shaving is coming out full width, then I know that edge is flat side to side. Check it for square. Okay. Now, put my measuring tape on it and see if we can detect. Okay, that says 6.5. That says 6.5. And that says 6.5, so that looks pretty good. What if we needed a piece that was only 5 inches wide? So we're in here somewhere. How are we going to get rid of that? So let's do it again. I'm going to set my panel gauge, where's my little square, for 5 inches. I always come back and check it before I actually put it to the wood. That's 5 right on. Put it in the vise. Make sure that the board is hanging out over the edge of the bench so it doesn't interfere with the panel gauge. Now, I'm going to put a mark on here first. Just so I know approximately where I need to be. Put that tape on. Peel that off. Now, even with a scrub plane, that's a lot of material to remove. So this is where, and again, if we're not using power tools, only hand tools, we need to go and grab a rip saw. Now you can put it in here. This is a saw bench that I made. You can either use it out over here or you can use that V to support the wood. Now you can cut as comfortably close to that line as you dare. Remember, it's a lot easier to saw than it is to plane material away. Get your saw going. Now I'm getting off my line a little bit. So I'm going to twist the saw a little bit in my hand just to get back to being parallel to that tape. If your saw gets a little sticky, you can take your magic plane wax. Love calling it that. Once your blade is heated up a little bit, then just use your thumb and forefinger to smear that along. Get rid of a lot of that resistance. One knee to support it. And if it starts to close in on you, you can take a wedge and just drive it in there to help open that board up a little bit. Just so I don't break a chunk off. Now I'm rusty because I should have been able to cut a lot closer than that. And then we would go through and do the exact same thing we just did. I recommend using that method where you set your board on your bench, propped up slightly so that you're above above that bottom piece that goes below the blade, and then use that as a big shooting board and clean it up. Now you need to have the reference face sitting down like that so that this edge will be square to the reference face. This edge may not be parallel to that. We haven't come to that yet. And if that was the case, I did that on the wrong side, I can simply put the tape on this side, marking gauge, panel gauge is still set, go in there and make that same mark so I have it. But either way, you're going to repeat the process, and now you'll end up with a board that is flat and true on this face. This edge is square to this edge and straight, and this edge will now be parallel to that one, which means it too will be square to this one and straight front to back. There you go. A little bit of exercise too. I hope you enjoyed this. We'll do another one real soon. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you'll know when we come out with new videos. If you like my work, if you like my style of teaching, click on any one of these videos to help take your woodworking to the next level. And I've always said better tools make it a whole lot easier. If you click on the icon with the plane and the chisel, it'll take you to our website, introduce you to all of our tools, and also talk to you about our online and in-person workshops. Good luck in your woodwork.